It's the 58th race staged at this venue, 30 years on from the first, and the Italian rider, fine victory, getting through to the front of the field and leading every lap of race number 1, through on lap 6 on Toprak Razgatlioglu to manage.